Morning, Abotai, Erev Shabbat Shalom. A very common issue that many people bring up is that they spend a lot of time every day engaged in many different assorted kinds of tefillot and reading Sefer Dvarim, skimming through different portions of Torah Shebichtav, reading, and takes them hours on end. And by the time they're done, they don't really have any more time for legitimate Torah study. Is this a correct practice or not? So let's look at it from a halachic perspective. Listen carefully. The Mishnah, all the way at the end of Masechet Menachot, says, whether a person does more or less, the primary things that Hashem wants, the kavanah. Maran Shulchan Aruch, in the very first siman in Shulchan Aruch, brings this Mishnah as halacha, and he says, Tov me'at tachanunim bechavana meharbot shelo bechavana, which means saying all sorts of prayers, just a little bit of them, with maximum kavanah, is better than saying a lot of prayers when without kavanah. What does that mean? It means as follows. The poskim explain. The Chachamim instituted 3 requisite prayers every day. Shacharit, Mincha, Ve'arvit. That is obligatory, that you can't get out of, that you have to say. All of the words of the tefillah, you have to say. But then, throughout the generations, there were many sages that authored, drafted all sorts of tefillot, all sorts of prayers and supplications for all sorts of different events. For instance, a good example of that is Sefer Likutei Tefillot. Likutei Tefillot was written by Rav Nachman Mibreslev, full of all sorts of tefillot, yiratzons, and Ribono Shel Olam. Maran Shulchan Aruch says it's not the best idea to engage in so many of those tefillot every day, all of those voluntary tefillot without kavanah. Rather, from time to time, you say a few of them with kavanah, that's enough, and leave the bulk of your time for doing the things that you're actually obligated to do, which is the requisite tefillot, shacharit, mincha, ve'arvit, and real Talmud Torah. Now, Mishnah Berurah on that Maran in Siman Aleph writes that technically all of these tefillot, all of these extra tefillot, all of these things that were drafted throughout the generations that were not incorporated as part of the actual Seder Tefillah, those were made for people, for Ami Haaretz, that are incapable of learning Torah anyway. And therefore, it's better for them to be doing something productive with their time, so at least they're reading these tefillot. The same thing, Maran Achida in Birkei Yosef, also in Siman Aleph, Saif Katan Tet, says the same thing. In Am Haaretz, who's anyway not learning Torah, he's not able to, not that he doesn't want to, he's not able to. So it's better for him to engage in these tefillot, or skimming through Torah Shebichtav, reading Sefer Dvarim, or reading Tehillim, or whatever it is, because anyways he can't do anything better. Says Maran Achida, look at Rabbeinu Ha'ari, the Ari HaKadosh. How many of these extra tefillot did he draft in his Sfarim? Very, very little. Most of his Sfarim are delve into the Torah. How come he didn't make so many of these tefillot for people to read? Because that's not the ikar, that's not the primary thing. And therefore, listen carefully, although innately there's nothing wrong with saying these tefillot, there's nothing wrong with reading Sefer Dvarim, obviously, there's nothing wrong with saying Tehillim, but those things should be kept to a minimum. A person should focus a bulk of his time on actual Talmud Torah, which is learning the Talmud, learning the Gemara, learning Halacha, and learning Musar. That is the main focus of what we have, the requisite tefillot that we have to do, Shacharit, Mincha, Ve'arvit, learning Gemara, Halacha, and Musar, a little bit of these tefillot and Tehillim here and there. That's what a well-rounded Jew has to do. I see it especially on Shabbatot. I see it sometimes. Sefer Dvarim has become a very, very big fad, especially with the promise that it brings Parnassah and unlocks all the gates, whatever it is, all the gates are open through reading Sefer Dvarim. I don't know, maybe why Sefer Dvarim, I don't know, maybe read Sefer Vayikra. What's with Sefer Dvarim? But whatever it is. Anyway, in any event, Sefer Dvarim, yeah? People spend, it's a long Sefer. People spend their entire Shabbat reading Sefer Dvarim. They don't have time for anything else, not to open up a Sefer, not to talk to their children, not to anything else. Not only that, they even do it during the tefillah because I have to finish. That is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. If a person's able to, if you're telling me, if a person, listen to this, Sefer Dvarim is great. Reading Sefer Dvarim is a wonderful thing. If you're telling me you're staying up all Leil Shabbat by yourself reading Sefer Dvarim so that the rest of Shabbat you have time to learn and spend with your family and things like that, that's a great thing. But if you don't have a minute left to learn after Sefer Dvarim, reading Sefer Dvarim, and after all of the other tefillot that you're saying, that's not the way a well-rounded Jew acts. That's not what the Chachamim had in mind. It's a halacha meforeshet. One of the first halachot in Shulchan Aruch. Have a wonderful day.